Words are how we connect with people, but when they're all you've got, the stakes are high. Meeting person to person, you can be clumsy with words, but you can charm with a smile or engage someone with genuine interest in conversation. If your business depends on connecting and being understood, then the words you use really matter. This week, my podcast guest is Geoff Kullman, and we're going to dive deep into how you can use words across your online ecosystem so you don't leave being understood to chance. Hi there, and welcome back to Amplify, the Digital Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm Bob Gentle, and every week I'm joined by amazing people who share what makes their business work. Now, we all know how hard it is to juggle all the things in your business, accounts, meetings, the never-ending inbox. And that's why I've teamed up with Agorapulse to give you more than 5 hours back a week when it comes to managing your social media marketing. No complicated Excel docs, long emails, or millions of open tabs. Simply manage all your social media channels in one place. Go to social.agorapulse.com/amplify and you will get 2 months free. Now, all you have to do is figure out how you want to spend those spare 5 hours. So if you're new to the show, take a second right now to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes, and you can grab some older ones when you're done with this one. Don't forget as well, you can join our Facebook community. Just visit amplifyme.fm/insiders and you'll be taken right there. So welcome along and let's meet Geoff. So this week I'm really excited to welcome Geoff Kullman to the show. Geoff, there's a lot I want to talk about with you, but for the listener who doesn't know you, why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and the kind of work you do?
Yeah, great. So good to be here with you, Bob. I'm excited to drink my maple-infused coffee while we talk as well. So my name is Geoff Kullman, and if you can't tell by my accent or by the coffee that I drink, I'm on the west coast of Canada, is where I'm located, on an island on the west coast of Canada in a rainforest, a temporal rainforest. So beautiful part of the world that I get to live in. And primarily, I work as both a copywriter for my clients and a copywriting coach for people who are starting out their own thing, solopreneurs, infopreneurs, entrepreneurs in general. Get to coach them and give them some tools and resources to before they're at that stage where they can hire a copywriter, or maybe they don't want to, but they can still write great copy without becoming a copywriter. So that's where I am and what I do.
I think that for me is the key, that a lot of people will take money for writing copy, but a lot of people can't pay money for writing copy, but they still need it. And I think having access to someone like you is super, super handy. Also, very interestingly, you were my second conversation with somebody on a Canadian island today. How weird is that?
Yeah, who's the other? We all know each other, Canadians, right? So who was the other guy?
Tom Madston.
Okay. I did not know Tom was Canadian. That's, I guess we don't all know each other, but 2 Canadians in one day.
One of the things that really stood out for me when I was looking through your stuff was StoryBrand. Because I've heard of StoryBrand, but the topic of StoryBrand and copywriting never excited me enough to bother my ass to go and read about it. So for somebody who's maybe heard of StoryBrand, the legend that is StoryBrand, how do you sum that up? What is StoryBrand and why should I care?
Well, I should say right off the bat, so I was certified with StoryBrand for a couple of years, few years, early on in their certification process. But I ended that certification a little bit over a year ago. So don't confuse me with one of their certified guides, but I certainly can walk through what that framework is. I mean, it is a great framework for anyone who enjoys telling stories and enjoys speaking or communicating or writing in a way that actually engages people. So the StoryBrand framework itself was all about basically a different take on the hero's journey, which can be convoluted and complicated. It works very well, but it can be perhaps a bit too complicated often for people to wrap their minds around. So Donald Miller and his team at StoryBrand really distilled that down into 7 sections, or a 7-part framework that basically anyone can figure out how to tell their story and tell it well. And one of the key pieces of that is the constant reminder that this story is about your audience. It's not about you. So even when you speak about yourself, it's not really about you. It's still about them. You know, it's you can So I often explain it, whether it's on my about page, on my website, whether it's in conversation with people like we're having right now, there's a lot of details to my story that I could get into. There's a lot of, experiences that I've gone through over time, but you really only speak to the ones or bring up the ones that are relevant or interesting, or have a purpose with your audience, right? You might not care that I'm wearing, pink socks today with hearts on them. That's not really relevant. I think I am anyway. I looked down at my feet. Yeah, pink socks. That wouldn't be a relevant detail. It might not be relevant, bits of my background, that I had a paper route when I was a kid. That might not be relevant to my audience unless they had a paper route, and I know that they had a paper route as a kid, or they were a hardworking kid or an entrepreneur as a kid. Then I could bring that up. But it's always focused on them. That's the biggest and best takeaway from the StoryBrand framework in general.
So I guess finding yourself in a post-StoryBrand world, from your perspective, your repertoire or your skill set or your own frameworks probably evolved since then.
Yeah. Even the frameworks and the processes that I go through with my clients, I won't say it's certainly not borrowed from StoryBrand. It's not necessarily borrowed from anyone, but oftentimes when as copywriters or marketers, when we're building out frameworks, quite often, we're taking a piece that we found valuable over here and a piece from over there and making our own thing. So that one piece that I just focused on, where we're the constant reminder that even if you're telling your story, it still needs to be about your audience. That's important. That's an important takeaway that I include in the processes that I walk my clients through. Again, whether I'm writing for them or teaching them to write for themselves, that's an important piece. So, yeah, but it's been interesting to see or witness, but to go through my own evolution, if you will, since post StoryBrand, that this new era that I'm in my business for the past year and a bit, of finding my own path, finding my own frameworks, finding my own clients that didn't come from StoryBrand and all that. That's been really interesting as well. Because for a while I depended on this certification, this badge on my site to be my lead gen for me, to bring me clients that I might not have been able to get before that. Whereas now I don't have that badge any longer. I don't depend on that badge any longer. And business is busier than ever. So, this post StoryBrand world has been an interesting ride for sure.
So at the heart of all this, the question, and this for me is a big question, and I think for a lot of people this should be the big question. People don't know you unless you really introduce yourself well. And now that sounds like stupid obvious, but most businesses don't, and especially owner-operated businesses, that this kind of feeling, and I think everybody will recognize this, where you met somebody for a sales meeting, for example, and you come away from that meeting saying, why did I tell them all that? None of that stuff was important. Why didn't I tell them this? This is actually what I really stand for. I just went down a complete rabbit hole of garbage. What must they think of me? This is how I think most people's approach to copywriting on their website, in their email content, and social media. They don't genuinely express the values and the value that they have very well at all. So it's one thing writing it when you know what it is, but how do you get to the point where you even know what it is? Because most people are entirely unaware of what people find valuable about them and how to articulate that.
Yeah, and as someone who writes copy, it's really hard. I'm also an introvert, right? So whether I'm writing or just getting into a conversation, it can be difficult to know where to start if you're starting from a blank page. So again, whether I'm writing for someone or whether I'm teaching them to write for themselves, it's all about the pre-work that you do. It's all about the foundation that you build before you ever write a single word, or before you ever go into a single sales conversation, or back when we could go into conference rooms full of other people at an event, right? It's all about the work that you do. Yeah, now it's like, ooh, I don't want to do that. Right, but it's all about the work that you do ahead of time. So an important exercise that I walk people through, exercise is also a gross word, but An important process that I walk people through is about how to match up your values with and your voice and your brand, and the message that you want to send out, to line that up with the aspirations of your potential client, or with your client, or with the person you're having a conversation with. So just like how I said, there's a lot of experiences in my personal story that I could get into, but not most of them are relevant, so I don't bring them up in a business or connection type of setting. So that's one piece that's important, but also knowing the values that I speak to. I might really value getting a vaccine. I do, but I don't talk about it necessarily because it's not an aligned value that I care about necessarily in a business sense. So even the values that you speak to, that's all pre-work that you do in terms of who you want to work with and the values that they hold. But the key is, and I was speaking with someone just last week about this, how they present their brand as kind of like cranked up to 11. It was Kira Hug. She's a great copywriter as well. She has a personal brand that's cranked to 11, as she called it, personality-wise. And that's because she wants to present a cranked to 11 aspiration that her potential clients have, that they want a brand that's cranked to 11. So you speak to those aspirations even in the values that you present and the stories that you tell, and in the way that you present yourself. So that's not something necessarily easy or that you can do in a 5-minute exercise, but it's critically important to actually speaking, again, whether it's written word or spoken word. It's critically important if you actually want to connect with people and actually want to draw in the right type of client or right type of business partner, that you speak to those, or that you present those aspirations to people. If that makes sense.
No, it totally does make sense. This is something that's puzzled me a lot, because when I watch great speakers, for example, they have great stories.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time they're making their points, but they're illustrating their points with stories.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I reflected on a little while ago was, we all have great stories.
Yes.
But if I ask you right now, tell me a story, you won't have them.
Mm-hmm.
They'll be gone.
Mm-hmm.
So an exercise I went through was, okay, what are the stories? What are the stories I've got? What's on the shelf here? Mm-hmm. And just make a bullet list of all the different sort of things that have happened in life that could sort of be used in this suite of content. And when you then come to write content, it makes it much, much easier. So I think there's this other side. I think what you were speaking about then is there's knowing what you want to say and who you want to say it to and how you want to say it and why.
Mm-hmm.
But then having these stories that can really act as a vector to add impact. I think that's an area a lot of people, there's a danger here if it looks like I'm trying to teach you copywriting. It's not the case at all. Where I'm trying to get to is, if people want to start communicating more effectively, I guess, what are the various tasks that they should do before they start writing any content? And I know that's not a simple question. I know you probably have whole products based on this, and that's fine. Tell me about those products. But for me, I think this is an important nut to crack for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'll get to that. I'll walk you guys through. I'll walk you, Bob, and your audience through one of my frameworks. But first, a really simple way to figure out what stories to tell. I think it was Michael Port that talked about like big ideas and then stories and how-tos or solutions. So if you can't figure out, you can write down all the stories you want, but you have to be able to connect them to something. So it might be simplest, it might be easiest to start with the big idea. So for instance, I just said, you need a brand, that connects to the aspirations of your client. Then I brought up the story of Kira Hug and her brand that's cranked to 11 because her prospects, her ideal avatar wants to be cranked to 11. So figuring out that big idea and then connecting it to that story, I prefer to start with the big idea and then figure out a story. But sometimes it works for other people to start with a story and connect it to a big idea. But knowing what to say and how to say it is important, like you said. So I walk people through something that I call the 6P framework. 6P framework simply because it has 6 parts to it, and they all start with a P. So
How convenient.
it's copywriters. We come up with some really original stuff. Figuring out things like the problem that your avatar, that your ideal customer, that your ideal client is going through, but then not just leaving it at the problem, but figuring out. And these are all exercises that I spend hours going through with people. So we'll just go super surface level, but figuring out what that tangible level problem is, that surface level problem is, but then also figuring out and writing down what is the cause of that problem and what is the effect or result of that problem. So, if the surface level problem is just, well, I suck at writing emails, to be a copywriting specific example. If I suck at writing emails, well, the effect of that being bad at email copy, the effect is that emails don't make money, right? But perhaps the cause is that you don't have, and this is one that I use for my own marketing, so that's why it's top of mind for me. But the cause, the outcome of that is that, the root problem there is that maybe you just don't have the tools that you need, you don't have the templates that you need, you don't have the training that you need, those types of things. So first thing is to figure out those few levels of problem, the surface, and then the effect and the cause. And then getting into the promise. How are you going to specifically talk about your solution to their pain points, to their problems, again, at that surface level, that effect level, and that cause level. And then figuring out a paradigm shift as well. That's the third P, is paradigm. Because often what is tripping people up is an incorrect or an old belief. Like that writing emails is really hard, but the paradigm shift that you introduce to them is important. It's kind of that wow aha moment where again you go, writing isn't hard. You just gotta have the tools or the training or whatever. Fourth P is proof, which is fun. Testimonials, case studies, but again you're tying them directly to. I teach people to have a proof testimonial that's specifically tied to that surface level tangible problem, a testimonial that's tied specifically to the effect, so my emails aren't making money, so a testimonial that's tied specifically to that, and then a cause level testimonial, and again, then those are 3 kind of stories that you can have ready to go with different big ideas as well.
Yeah.
And then a transition point, a prompt, I call it. It could also be called a pivot point, but I don't know why I don't call it a pivot, because it is a pivot, but I call it a prompt. And that's kind of a point, whether it's in a conversation or on a sales page, in your copy, in your emails, where you figure out how you make the transition from general conversation to the last P, which is pitch. But again, you want to have a prompt that's tied to the surface, to the effect, and to the cause, and then a pitch. Pitch you don't need to tie necessarily into those 3 things. That's just what you're offering and all that. But once you've done all that pre-work, all that background work, all that, and this isn't even, we haven't even got into avatar stuff, but once you've done all that pre-work, you just have so much more, for lack of a better word, you have so much more material to go into any conversation or any writing project with. Because you know exactly what you want to talk about and how you want to talk about it, and how it lines up with the person that you're talking to as well.
Well, let's talk about avatar, because I would be curious on your perspective on this. That when I work with clients on avatar, I'm working on them from a different perspective. And almost every single time, whether it's in a coaching group or with a corporate, they get to the point where they have this aha moment. They understand what an avatar is. They understand why it's important. And they immediately decide they need 3, 4, 5 avatars. Right. What's your perspective on the one avatar versus multiple avatars question?
It's one of those answers where it depends, right? For some businesses, it's appropriate to have one avatar, and it just makes things simpler to have one avatar. For other businesses, I'll use my own, for instance, I have to have multiple avatars because they're totally different offers for totally different audiences. So one avatar of mine is, folks, typically solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, online entrepreneurs who are making a good living. They're already at typically 7 figures in their business, and they need to bring on a copywriter to help elevate, to help grow, to help free up some of their own time. So that's one from the copywriting perspective. from the service perspective, where it's a totally different avatar from somebody who needs me to help them and coach them and train them on copywriting. So I have to have multiple avatars, but that's years and years into my business as well. So often early on, if you have multiple avatars, this isn't always the case, but often early on, if you have multiple avatars, you're just looking to add confusion that doesn't need to be there. Confusion both to what you're saying to potential customers and to your business in general. Different avatar means you have to have a different offer, right? Which means you have to have perhaps a different product, which adds levels of complication to your business, especially if you're starting out or early on or haven't hit 6 figures or whatever yet. You don't need that complication. And if you think you do, maybe you need to rethink what you're doing or how you're doing it. But again, it depends. Sometimes it might be the right answer, but I don't often see that. I often see people overcomplicating, especially too early. So
I agree. I think the danger is when you have multiple avatars, especially when you're looking at it from a content perspective, you have to split your resources because you need to create content for all these different avatars, which doubles, triples, potentially, or dilutes is the alternative.
Yeah.
The content that you're creating, and you end up not actually standing out for anyone. I think where you're talking about it from a product or a funnel perspective is a different story.
Right.
I think there, having different avatars, the way you describe it, makes complete sense because your funnels will make complete sense for people at different stages in their business, as you described.
Yeah. And again, that's been years and years in the making for me, right? Where I didn't come out of the gate, I should say, offering both writing services and coaching to startups and side hustles and early stage entrepreneurs. That's been a more recent thing as I've built out my own business, built out my own templates, built out my own resources, and learned a lot of the lessons along the way that now I can teach to other people. But that out of the gate, I didn't have multiple avatars. I didn't have multiple offers. So yeah, again, it's an it depends answer, but typically, I mean, you're looking to add a complication, and it's not a good thing if you have multiples of avatars.
Now, there's something I want to ask you about, and we may end up taking this question out because I don't know if you feel equipped to address it right now, but you're a copywriter, so you're the only person I can think of that I should be asking about this. I don't know, have you had an opportunity to look at some of these new, I'm not going to name any of them, but the AI-powered copywriting tools that are out there?
Yeah.
And how do you feel about them? Is there a place for them? Who should be using them? Because I'll tell you my experience. They're a clumsy mess. And I find that, if you really have no idea how to go from a blank page to starting, they might help you as a prompt.
Yeah.
But what's your perspective on this?
I actually had a few conversations about this exact topic yesterday because it's something that as copywriters we have to address, right? Similar to, if you're selling logos, if you design logos for a living, you have to address that Canva exists and that Fiverr exists, so people can do it for a lot cheaper than before. You just have to address it. You have to realize it's there. So I was speaking with somebody yesterday as well, somebody who was involved early on in the tech side of AI in general. So not copywriting AI, but just machine learning and AI in general. About 10, 15 years ago. And his perspective was there's a lot that the physical, like chips and I don't know all the technical stuff, but like the physical hardware isn't even capable of. So his perspective was, we're at least 10 years away. Now, technology is evolving quickly, of course, but we're probably 10 years away from AI being able to actually write copy that feels human, that you can't tell wasn't written by a human. So how do we use these tools now? I think they're great for coming up with something like a first draft. Again, whether you're a copywriter like me, I often hire other writers, junior writers, to come up with the first draft for me. So an AI tool could do that instead, perhaps. But they can come up with that first draft. But there's going to be language patterns. There's going to be avatar issues. There's going to be stuff that they're not able yet, AI is not able yet to address. So if you're someone who's not a copywriter, you can still use it as a draft version of what you want to put out into the world. There are also other tools that are basically fill in the blank kind of template builders. I won't mention those either in the names of those, but there's some okay ones out there. The difference between the template ones and the AI ones is that the template ones require you to actually be a fairly gifted copywriter. Their marketing is great because they sell it as, you can get a really quick and easy Facebook ad or write a sales page in half an hour just by filling in a few prompts. Well, that's true, but you have to know how to write well to fill those prompts in a way that's actually going to sell something. So both of those things, whether it's the template versions or the AI versions, there's still a lot of work you have to do after you use them. So I think they're a good tool. I think AI is a good thing, but don't rely on it. Don't depend on it. Know that you're using it as a tool to give you a draft, to get you started, so that you're not just staring at a blank page. And there's value there, but it's not going to get you anywhere close to a final product, or it shouldn't.
I think the perspective that's developed as you were talking for me is a little bit like my business used to be predominantly designing and building high-end websites.
Mm-hmm.
And large sections of my competition would grind their teeth if you say the word Wix and Weebly and Squarespace. But for me, because I was at the high end,
mm-hmm.
I was looking at it from the perspective of, well, it's getting businesses into the habit of understanding how websites work.
Yeah.
And when they understand what they want, then they'll come to a professional. And I think what these tools are potentially doing is introducing whole groups of people to writing and the importance of it in ways that they never were before. They just wrote garbage. Now they're starting to think about it. Yeah. They're starting to think about the importance of it. And they'll probably take them in the direction of people like you to level up, to go from garbage to good enough, from needing the crutch or the creative prompts that these tools give to actually being able to do this intuitively. Now they go from, okay, now I kind of know where I want to go, but I don't know how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't getting there before, but now I see where I want to go. So now I want some help. So I guess that kind of segues nicely into, how does copywriting work as a coaching service? Because I'm very curious about that as well.
Yeah, well, to the point that you just made, right? It's the recognition, or you got to start with the recognition that copy is something that's really important, and that the garbage that you might have put out there before isn't going to get the job done. The words that you use matter. The emotion that you pull in through those words, that matters. The way that you do that matters. All of that in terms of copy matters. So teaching people, walking people through, like the 6P framework of not just here's the 6Ps, but how do we actually build out an avatar and understand this person. I usually say, how do we understand this person better than they know themselves? And so that begins with like I said, the pre-work. But in terms of coaching copywriting, copywriting is actually, a bit down the road. You got to learn how to do that pre-work first before you ever write a single word, which is just great. It's great training for business as well, right? You got to know who you're talking to. You got to know the pain points that they're going through. You have to have stories ready to go, testimonials ready to go, all those things before you ever write a single word of copy. And then it just gets down to, if you want to, you can use one of those AI tools or those template tools, and they're going to get you part of the way. But you've given those tools the right information, the right background information, the right intel on who they're talking to. So a lot of what I teach is usually, here's the background information, follow this template, and the templates are filled out with, speak to that, speak to this, speak to the effect problem in this area, or speak to the paradigm shift, the surface level paradigm shift in this area, or something like that. And then again, that gets them a good portion of the way there, and then it's coaching is just then going through it with alongside people, saying, oh, I see what you've done here. I see the way you worded it, or what you were going for, but what if we tweak the way, the exact wording to something more along the lines of this? And then as a team effort, we can get it a lot closer to a finished product, or a lot closer to something that's really going to speak to their audience and nail their point home. So it's more of a the coaching that I do is more of a done with you type of offer, where I don't want to leave people just hanging. I want to give them the tools, I want to give them the templates, and then the training, but also walk them through, review with them. Here's what you said. Here's how you could have said it, and then tell them why. So next time they don't need to have me review it. They just learn along the way how to write good copy. Yeah,
that's a nice way of doing it. It's a little bit like a tennis coach. That it's not classroom learning. It's you learn as you play.
Yeah, yeah.
So I have another question, and again, it sort of popped up as you were talking, and it centers on emotion, because I think the coaches, consultants, they're quite used to speaking in terms of emotion to their clients and injecting some emotion into their copy.
Mm-hmm.
But I look at another section of my own client base, for example, and they really, the content is quite flat, emotionless. It's cold. I'm not going to say the word soulless, but soulless. How do you address the whole question of emotion in content, where you can quite obviously see it's missing, where they're focusing on facts and persuasion rather than trying to take people on a journey, if you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, first of all, facts and logic and data, that all has its place. You just have to know where to put it. So in an email campaign, for instance, maybe there's one email in your campaign where it focuses on logic, because people buy on emotion and then justify it afterwards with reason, right? With logic. So you want to give them those perhaps data points that they can reason their decision afterwards. But you certainly want to speak to the emotion. You want to bring people on a journey. And again, walking through that or going through that pre-work is going to get you a lot of the way there. So another exercise that I walk people through is to look not at just the the goals that the avatar has. And that's often like one of the first things that we do, one of the first steps in building out an avatar. What are their goals and pain points and things like that? But also, what are their motivations? What's motivating them to do this? Do they want to lose 20 pounds just for the simple fact of losing 20 pounds, or do they want to lose 20 pounds so they're more confident? That's their motivation. Do they want to lose 20 pounds because they have, the example in my mind again is going into a conference room. Sorry, I know that makes you feel icky, Bob, but right? Do they want to lose those 20 pounds because they want to walk in with confidence in that conference room and think, man, I own this room. So what's motivating their behavior? What's motivating their decision, either to take action or to not take action? So when I speak about emotion, I don't usually associate it to, they're angry. Well, what's motivating that anger? What's behind that anger? What's the question behind the question that they're asking? What's the emotion behind the emotion that they're feeling? Things like that. And again, when you dig a bit deeper, that's where you get great copy. That's the big difference between B+ copy and A+ copy, or good copy and great copy is figuring out the emotion behind the emotion, the motivation behind their goal, and things like that. So
I love it.
Yeah.
I think for me that's a bit of a bugbear that people write copy that's not really triggering anything.
Mm-hmm.
It might be a great vector for data, but I'm not feeling anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we're emotional creatures, so if you want me to act, trigger an emotion, and I'll probably act. I'm impulsive like that.
Yeah, and get different parts of their brain operating as well. Like don't just focus on logic, don't just focus on emotion. And that's why I love using paradigm shifts or playing one part of the copy off of another, because I want their brain functioning. I want different areas of their brain functioning as they're reading through the copy as well. So you don't just write. Again, pure emotion isn't going to get anyone anywhere, but playing emotion off of a paradigm shift, playing emotion off or motivations off of their goals or their values, that's going to engage their brain a lot differently. And we could totally geek out on that, but we won't. But engaging different parts of their brain also makes for great copy and really effective copy, because you've, like you said, you brought them on that journey, not just of a story, but a journey that they're going through in their own brain of engaging multiple areas as they're reading through as well.
So this is sort of the last place I wanted to go, because I think it's an important place to go. Most people, you guys listening, you know what I'm talking about. You're looking at a car crash of content across your ecosystem. You've got website copy, email copy, social content, funnel content. You've probably got, lots of other bits and pieces. And it's all kind of wrong, and it's not kind of working. How can you get from car crash to golden in the most effective way possible? Where should you start? Which order would you go in? I know I'm putting you on the spot. It's a difficult sort of landscape to orientate yourself around, but this is the kind of scenario that probably faces you and your clients all the time.
So by order, you mean, like email and website and that type of thing?
Triage. How do you decide where to spend your time and your resources first?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if this directly answers your question, but I think the most important thing to begin with, whether you're starting out or you're in triage, this sounds repetitive and it sounds lame, but you got to start out with knowing who you're talking to. Back to the beginning of our conversation, Bob, you got to know what big ideas and what stories you're going to talk about. So as an example, and lots of us have done this. I did this previously. I know lots of people that have done it and continue to do it. But say that you're spending money on a Facebook ad, $5 a day, $10 a day. So not necessarily a huge amount of money, but not nothing either. So you're spending money on Facebook ads and you're sending people to a page, to part of your funnel, but you haven't actually built out your funnel yet. So you're just trying to get that vanity metric of people that are clicking and landing on your landing page. But you don't have a fully formed offer yet, or you don't have a fully formed product yet. So a lot of times people they jump the gun and they start spending money and driving traffic and all that to make themselves feel good, or just because they think, this is what I should be doing. So they end up just wasting money on those ads without actually knowing who they're talking to, or what the product is, or what the offer is. So you got to figure out all those base level things, those foundational things, before you spend a single dollar on driving traffic. So in terms of copy, where do you start? Well, you start with those same things. What is your offer? How are you going to write that out? What is your product? How are you going to describe it? How are you going to build in those emotional pulls and that little bit of logic? And, how are you going to write that? Having a sales page actually ready, whether it's a short sales page or a long sales page, you got to have something before you're spending a single dollar on driving traffic there. But going back to the basics, you got to have all those foundational pieces ready to go first. And it can, especially if you're doing it yourself, it can take a while, and that's okay. It shouldn't necessarily be rushed, but if you're driving traffic to your funnel, whether you're paying money to drive that traffic or not, you got to have, okay, so now they've opted into this thing. You've given them a lead magnet. You've given them a checklist. You've given them a webinar, whatever they've opted in for. Well, you got to have a follow-up email campaign that's going out to them as well. You can't just, it's great to get them on your list. Now, what are you going to do with them? So all those funnel pieces are important, and you got to have them all done before you're ready to let people see it, really. So that's kind of a roundabout answer to what you asked.
I knew it was a difficult question to answer, because everybody's different. Everybody's situation is different. Everybody's priority is going to be kind of different. You're absolutely right to circle back to who's it for? Who's it about? Mm-hmm. So it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and in terms of copy, you got to have assets ready before you drive any traffic. So maybe start with a lead magnet is what I'd say. Get people onto your list, and email marketing is, by the way, if you don't, I'm not just biased. It's fact. It's logic. It's data. That email marketing is far more profitable than all social media marketing combined, still, by a landslide. So
you hear that, people?
Yeah,
you hear that, people?
And I don't just say that because I both write email marketing campaigns and teach people how to do it for themselves. I say it because the data tells us that. So have your email marketing ready to go, whether it's just a nurturing campaign where you're giving folks value, giving your new opt-ins, giving them value over the next couple of weeks or months, or if you're actually sending them out an email campaign, an onboarding campaign that's trying to turn them from cold to sold, right? From an audience that doesn't know you to an audience that's paying you money as a client. They've opted into your list. You got to have something ready to go. That is my bias perhaps, but that's my take on things.
No, I think that's a really good take. I guess this kind of takes me, I'd say, Geoff, if people want to take things further with you, how can you do that? But you very specifically told me you're launching something, I think it's next week. What is that and who's it for?
Yeah, and I didn't even mean to give myself a segue there, but it's actually about, it's the email, it's a training, a workshop, masterclass on a specific email campaign. It's called the 6P sequence, believe it or not. One email for each of those 6 Ps to turn prospects from cold to sold. So and this is a campaign that has worked super well for my own business, brought hundreds of thousands of dollars into my own business. And I don't say that to brag. I say that to prove that it works. I do say it to brag that it's also, brought in millions of dollars for my clients. That's the bragging part. But but learning how to write that campaign, we're going to do it all in one day. Normally I do it over a 6-week period, one short call every week. We're going to get it all done in one day, one 4-hour session plus some follow-up. And it's just called the 6P Sequence Masterclass. So it's on Saturday, March 27th. And if people want, you can just go to geoffkullman.com/Bob. That sounds like a good link. And I'll put a coupon.
Really easy to remember.
I'll put a coupon code on there and give people $50 off, which takes it down to less than $100 for the session. But that's the email campaign that I was just talking about of great, you got a lead magnet, you got people on your list. How are you going to turn them from a cold lead or a prospect that just met you into an actual paying client or customer? So that's what that campaign is all about. So yeah, I'd love to have people join us.
And if people do want to connect with you, how would you like them to do that? Which social media platform do you like the best?
I probably spend my most time on Instagram. So folks can just go to, it's at Geoff Kullman. Don't try to spell my name. Just, I'm sure my name will be somewhere.
There'll be a link in the show.
Yeah, so just copy and paste that. But Instagram.com/Geoff Kullman. You can also check out my podcast if I'm allowed to speak to that as well.
Oh, yeah.
That's called
They can only listen to my podcast for 1 hour a week. There's a lot of extra time.
Yeah. So in those other hours of the week, it's called The Psychology of Copywriting. So that's where we didn't geek out on it, Bob, in our conversation, but that's where I get to geek out on what's going on in the brain of your readers as they're reading your sales copy, as they're reading your emails, your Instagram posts, your sales pages, your website, your blog, all that. What's going on in their brain, and how can you use that information to write better, to write copy that's going to engage their brain in a better way. So that's what my podcast is all about, Psychology of Copywriting. I hope you can check it out, folks.
We can talk about psychology of copywriting another time.
It's fascinating stuff. I love geeking out on that stuff.
Geoff, what's one thing you do now that you wish you'd started 5 years ago?
A couple of years ago, I joined my first mastermind, and that is something that I wish I'd started right from the beginning, where I had a group of people that were leaning into me as I was leaning into them, that they were resourcing me as I was resourcing them, that they were keeping me accountable as I was for them, that we were learning together and growing together and connecting each other and referring each other. That has been the massive difference maker in my business. So I wish that I did that from the very beginning. I wish I did that 5 years ago. I am so glad that I did do it, that I've continued to invest every month in that group. And really, in pandemic times, those have been the friends that I've relied on the most as well. So I'm glad I did it, because now I actually have a group of friends that I get to talk to and see on Zoom, but see every couple of weeks. So that's been an added benefit. But I wish I did that 5 years ago, and I cannot recommend it enough for others to find a mentor that you want to follow, find a coach that you want to have alongside you, or whoever's leading the group, and make that strategic investment in your business to actually surround yourself with a group of people with similar goals, even if they're not in the same niche or market or whatever as you, but they have similar goals and similar, you're kind of on the same level, but you're calling each other to a higher level. That's something that everyone should be investing in, especially in this online entrepreneur space that many of us are in.
I absolutely echo that. I think everything Geoff said, double from me. Geoff, you've been an awesome guest. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely.
No, my pleasure's all mine.
And I'll have to have you on the Psychology of Copywriting podcast. That's where we can geek out.
Ooh, that'd be fun. Every single time someone touches your online world, it's with words. Words matter, so it's worth taking time to make sure they make sense. Maybe you need a Geoff, or maybe you just need a friend to proofread. Just do the best with what you have, but take words seriously. Before we go, just a quick reminder to subscribe, and if you haven't already joined our Facebook group, you'll find a link in the show notes or visit amplifyme.fm/insiders. I would love for you to connect with me on social media. Follow me wherever you hang out. You'll find me at Bob Gentle, and if you do, message me, let me know, and I'll follow you back. If you enjoyed the show, then I would love a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. I can't underestimate how much it means to me, and it's the very best way to help me reach more subscribers. My name's Bob Gentle. Thanks again to Geoff for giving us his time, and to you for listening, and I will see you next week.